Hello, and welcome to Getting In, a College Coach Conversation. I am Shannon Vasconcelos. I will be your host for this week. And we're actually recording this the week before Thanksgiving. It's not going to air until the week after Thanksgiving. So I hope that you all out there had a great Thanksgiving, that you got a chance to relax with your families, eat lots of yummy food, and hopefully could back burner thoughts of the college admissions process for a day or two. So I hope you all had a great Thanksgiving. Now that we're turning back to the college admissions process a little bit, we've got a great show for you today. In our next segment, we're going to be talking about summer programs sponsored by the State Department, which should be interesting. And in our final segment, we're going to talk about financial aid for transfer students. But for now, in our first wonderful segment, I have joining me Ed Devine from the admissions office at Hampden-Sydney College. Welcome, Ed.
Yeah, thank you, Shannon. Thanks for having me, and happy holidays, folks.
Yeah, absolutely. Ed, we have to get this out of the way. What is your favorite Thanksgiving leftover?
I make a great leftover sandwich with everything in it. Cranberry sauce, gravy, potatoes, it all goes in.
I fully support that. You got to throw it all in there. Perfect, Ed.
Yep.
So, Ed, for our listeners out there who may not be super familiar or at all familiar with Hampden-Sydney College, could you just give us the very brief elevator pitch? What is Hampden-Sydney all about?
Yeah, great question. And I love talking about Hampden-Sydney. We are actually the 10th oldest college in the country and the first form not connected to the King and Queen of England. So we will be celebrating 250 years coming up pretty soon. A lot of our ideals and the reason the college was formed was much like the ideals that were kind of crafting this country, the experiment that we were going through. So we've been at it for a while. Some standout things that your students would want to know: we're small. We're just under 1,000 students on a beautiful campus. We have over 1.1 acres per student. So a lot of space for our students to enjoy the great outdoors. But we're 1,000 students and all male. So one of only 3 remaining all-male colleges in the country. But we do boast some very happy students, the 6th happiest in the country, according to Princeton Review. Our students love the experience and a really dialed-in alumni network, ranked number 3 in the country. So our graduates stay very connected to Hampden-Sydney and to the current students on campus.
That's fantastic. So, as you mentioned, sort of one of the most unique things is that you are an all-male college. And I bet some of our listeners didn't even know that there were still some all-male colleges out there. I think we talk a little bit more, and there are more of them, all women's colleges.
Yep.
So I'm curious, from your perspective, why do you think that a student might want to consider a single gender college? And I'm curious, do you think it's the same reason a man would want to consider a men's college as a woman would want to consider a women's college, or are there different motivations involved? What's your perspective on that?
Yeah, I think it's probably similar to why all female colleges. Earlier in my college career, I heard more about the all-female schools and the power, when you sit through a presentation, the power of the experience, what the alumni do. I think there's a lot of similarities. Mm-hmm. I think the experience is not as different as students make it out to be. If you attended a football game at Hampden-Sydney on a Saturday, probably about 70% of the fan base would be young ladies from surrounding schools. So really the experience comes down to that classroom and that engagement with faculty. I think the history is a compelling part. A lot of students love to dig into the history of why the all men's colleges. So there's that component. I think success rates speak for themselves. But I think when you get down to the experience, it's the way perhaps men and women learn differently. I think there's a lot of great research on both sides for all men and all women's colleges about participation within the classroom, within student life activities. There's that sense of the opportunity to be vulnerable, to kind of lean into a full experience. So I think those are some of the reasons students like it. I will say that not a lot of our guys go into it 100% convinced, yes, sign me up for an all-male experience. Many, we call it the slow burn. If you sit and listen to a student panel, they'll talk about the college search and how it unfolded, and how sometimes late in April of that senior year, when making the final decision, that experience, the Hampden-Sydney experience, really called to these young men. So people have questions about it, no question. But I think if you look at that, the way that students engage in the classroom and extracurricular activities, just understanding that we do perhaps learn differently in a broad stroke. So I think our faculty are very geared into teaching young men. And when you sit in on our classes, the engagement very early on, from freshman year on, is pretty impressive. And a lot of our young men say they may not have approached high school in that regard, but they feel comfortable to really be engaged. Again, show that vulnerability, the opportunity to be coached and guided by mentors throughout the campus. They lean into that a little bit more. And I think it creates a very fulfilling experience for our students.
That's really interesting. And I think it does sound similar to at least some of the motivations for a woman, perhaps looking at an all women's college. So that's really interesting. And another thing that I found interesting, digging around on your website a little bit, is you mentioned in your brief intro that you've got some of the happiest students there at Hampden-Sydney.
Yeah.
You also turn up on some of the high up on the rankings of like a best college value, best return on investment.
Yeah.
Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, Shannon, I love talking to students generally about college search and really thinking about that value piece. Really, I hope drives students to think about the 4-year experience. So not just the name of the school or the rankings where they fall, but really what they can get involved with in that 4 years. Current students on campus will refer to that as the bucket list. And I think that value piece comes from packing a lot into 4 years. It definitely, I think over the last 15 years, we've talked a lot about return on investment. Our ROI is something that's kind of made it into our vernacular, but the payoff after that 4 years, I think really the way to look back on that is to say, did I do everything in my 4-year experience that I wanted to do? So study abroad, research on campus, internships, finding opportunities to be a campus leader. Those are the things that I think lead to success, that next level success. Our alumni network is very dialed in. So a Hampden-Sydney student calling out to a graduate of Hampden-Sydney is going to find doors that will open in the way of internships, summer internships, jobs, even informational interviews. So I think that return on investment comes back in that fashion. But really, I think students look back at that small college experience and think, I did everything I wanted to do. It was worth what I set out to do as far as my time and my money. And they really packed a lot into that 4 years. The job market, our students, through their leadership, it's very hard to graduate Hampden-Sydney and not have leadership on your resume. Because we're small, the opportunity exists all over the place. So leadership will stand out on their resume. We'll probably talk a little bit about our rhetoric program, but the ability to communicate beyond what your major might have taught you becomes a real powerful part of that return on investment. But through our Compass program, that's what that's an umbrella term for all of our experiential learning. But through Compass, we really kind of organically drive students towards the study abroad, the on-campus research, the summer internships, et cetera. And that does lead to that high return on investment in way of first jobs, high paying salaries, and then extended successful careers that really make that investment worthwhile.
Totally. And I would love to hear more about your rhetoric program. I read a little bit about it on your website, and to me, it did sound like something that I think is not as emphasized at a lot of colleges, and it does develop extremely valuable skills.
Yeah, it really does. And alumni that look back on the rhetoric program, some leaned into it, kind of knew it was of interest. They loved the idea of leadership and communicating. Others, it's new to them. But the rhetoric program is a 2-year curriculum, could be considered part of our general education or core courses. But it's a series of courses. Students are tested when they arrive, but it's about their ability to write and to write persuasively. Expository writing is part of it. They can go through a remedial course and then work their way up to the required coursework. It does culminate with a 3-hour exam in sophomore year. And it's a very intense, cool rite of passage celebrated by alumni across the world. That idea of completing and going through that rhetoric program is something we all celebrate and know long-term it's going to be one of those big return on investment pieces. When you talk to graduates of Hampden-Sydney, they'll talk about the rhetoric program, their ability to communicate, speak persuasively, and that's across all different disciplines. And whether they're presenting for research or asking for funding for certain events that they do at work, that ability to present and speak and write and communicate strongly is a big part of that. Many people, when they hire, they will talk about soft skills, especially in the STEM fields. How strong are the soft skills? And so this rhetoric program really is a 2-year intensive program to prepare students to be very strong communicators. And our, we have a lot of students that go into politics, foreign affairs, things of that nature, where it makes sense. But some of our STEM students will look back and say, man, computer science and a rhetoric minor took me to the places I wanted to go.
Absolutely. Yeah. So I'm curious to hear a little bit more about kind of your campus culture. You mentioned, as an all-male school, you visit our campus, might not actually feel as different from a co-ed school as you would think, but are there unique things about your campus culture, do you think?
I think there are, for sure. And if you, again, popped in on a weekend, we were a highly rated tailgating school. Many people would come and video that experience in disbelief because of our size. We're Division III. But really the ability to draw in young students from, again, the local universities. But on campus, there is something called the Brotherhood that is very well known. We do have an honor code. So all of our students freshman year will sign a pledge, basically saying that they will not steal, cheat, or lie, and that they will uphold each other to do the same. So the honor code really is the underpinning of our strong sense of brotherhood. And when it comes to discourse or holding each other up, there's a real pride in doing that. So that brotherhood is something you'll sense on campus. Mm-hmm. I've been on many college campuses, and it is one of the friendliest places by far. Very few students buried in their mobile devices, very engaging when you walk across campus. So that sense of strong community is there. Our students love the outdoors. We are a beautiful campus. We have 3 ponds on campus. You can fish, kayak. We have ropes courses. We have all kinds of fun outdoor activities. We're about an hour and 20 minutes from Richmond, so more of that kind of rural experience. One of my favorite things, we have fire pits out in front of every resident hall. So to walk around on a Friday night and see guys sitting around a fire chatting really gives that sense of building community. A lot of our guys have background in summer camps. Many of them have been involved in team sports, so that team attitude really permeates. We have very specific scholarships for Boys State and for Eagle Scouts. So that's another kind of interesting part of who we are. A lot of athletes on campus, so we are proud of our Division III athletic programs. Really having a great couple of years in basketball. A lot of fun supporting the teams in football and baseball, swimming. So a lot of school pride in that sense as well.
That's really great. And I think you just sort of tossed out a few of them, but are there particular types of students that you think would be a good fit or maybe not a good fit for Hampden-Sydney?
Yeah, I think the good fit, the student that loves the team, they want to be part of team, they want to take on leadership roles. Again, there's that interest in probably the outdoors. Yeah. Students will say you can't be somebody that easily gets bored and be successful at Hampden-Sydney. They create all kinds of fun, create games. They're the driving force behind the ropes course and some of the outdoor activities that we do. But it's a place where you have opportunity and a space to kind of create fun. I think our students that are looking for kind of a deep city experience, that they're not going to really necessarily get. Yeah. Our students that do attend will probably find that in their study abroad or their study away programs. We're only 3 hours from DC, for example. So students might make their way to DC for that big city experience.
Totally. And I'll just say for the benefit of the students out there, when I was applying to college, I was confident the one thing I wanted was to be in a big city. In the end, I ended up in Amherst, Massachusetts, which is, for those who don't know, very kind of rural part of Massachusetts.
Yeah.
And ended up loving it and getting into the outdoors and hiking. It's stuff that I had not done before. Yeah. So I think it's funny what you may think you want as a high school student. Yeah. It sometimes changes over the course of your college education. It's a time for growth and exploration. And I think you can certainly find that over there at Hampden-Sydney. And just I like to ask our guests from different admissions offices, because I always think it's fun to see the successful people that they didn't all attend, Harvard, Princeton, Yale, that there are successful alumni from so many amazing colleges across the country. And I'd love to hear, you have any kind of high profile alumni from Hampden-Sydney?
Yeah, Shannon, we love talking about our alumni and kind of what got them there, but we've got like Kirk Zambetti. He was the CEO of Yeti Coolers, and so that company had an amazing trajectory. A former Swiss ambassador, Ed McMullen. One that people might know is Scott Cooper. He's won an Academy Award with Jeff Bridges for the movie Crazy Heart. He's also made some great movies called like Pale Blue Eyes, Black Mass, works with Christian Bale a lot, but yeah, here he is in Los Angeles and doing the LA thing. And he will talk really a lot about the rhetoric program, even though he's a great writer in English, but the ability to kind of network and all the things that come out of that rhetoric program really helped to kind of lead him on to some great things. But a lot of folks in leadership. We've got a senior producer at the Golf Network. We've got Rob Citrone is one of the guys that's a partial owner of the Pittsburgh Steelers, a hedge fund manager who found great success, but a lot in very strong leadership roles. And it's, when you talk about our experience, again, it's hard to find students who haven't stepped into leadership roles on campus. And that's really what drives them into that success. So we've got guys doing great things, and we love to tell the stories about those folks and how they got there, because a lot of them didn't know by major. They just had that full undergrad experience. A lot of times, like you said, finding themselves in a more rural space where they had time to think about life, try new things. But that was that 4-year catalyst that led on to some great success later in life.
That's fantastic. And we're just about out of time. But for students who are listening who might not have known much about Hampden-Sydney before and are now thinking, that sounds kind of interesting. Maybe I'd like to go here. What should we know about your admissions process?
Yeah, it's very personalized. We are on the Common Application. We really are going to talk a lot about your activities list. We do want to take a look at that essay to see who you are as a person. We love to meet with students. So if you're curious and want to lean into that process, we do enjoy the opportunity to meet in person or virtually. If you have had a late start, we do work with young men, and that's our expertise. But if you've had a late start, if you're that late bloomer, but you really want to be able to lean in and talk about that, I highly encourage doing that one-on-one meeting. We don't bite. It's usually a learning experience both ways, but definitely lean in and connect with us or our graduates, because we want to personalize the approach to admissions. Of course, come down and see us. Many of our students will throughout the search process, others after they get admitted, again, referring back to that slow burn. But at some point, definitely come and see us to unpack what the experience might look like. But really, we're going to look at your transcripts and your grades. But after that, the activities list, that essay, who you are outside the classroom, that exhibited leadership or commitment to team. And we'll ask even, counselors and look for recommendation letters that talk about that sense of being a good man or being a good citizen. That willingness to explore what that means really would resonate with us through the admission process.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for joining us today, Ed. I learned a ton, and I'm fairly confident that our listeners did too. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Shannon. And thanks for doing what you do, guiding these young people. Hats off to you and your crew.
Oh, absolutely. We love every minute of it. And listeners, stick around. In our next segment, we're going to be talking about State Department sponsored summer programs. So stay tuned.